Hello and welcome back to another day of ICMI 2021 here in America. I am joined with Tom Golden, and we just got done watching his talk, and boy, what a talk that was. So, any of you that have questions, feel free to ask them, and we'll go ahead. Oh, we got one from Ken Jovet right away. Thank you, sir. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. Hey, Tom, always love hearing you talk. Like you, I'm fascinated with testosterone in males. I've always been gifted, cursed with very high testosterone. I've always had to manage it, and it's not been easy. Clearly, there's too much, and there's also too little to have. How do you see men of the present and future with testosterone levels decreasing so rapidly and significantly over the past 50 years? How will men be men? Are we witnessing a new human in creation?
Boy, what a good question. And for those of you who don't know Ken wrote a series of books, the Brilliant Bob books, that are just great for young boys. If you've got young boys, you know, who are your sons, or your nephews, or your next door neighbors, get them these books. They're great. I mean, they're male friendly. They paint a positive message for boys. And the boys will freak out because they've never read books that are male positive before. So Ken, thank you for the book and for the question. Fascinating question. You know, the whole thing about testosterone dropping is just alarming and fascinating. I mean, why would it be dropping like that? And there's a lot of theories about why it is. The scariest one is what do they call those things? The endocrine disruptors that are in plastics that they think are related to throwing off testosterone and lowering the levels like that. So yeah, I think we are definitely going through quite a transition, and it's really curious to see what's going to happen. You know, you could say that what you see out there now with boys with less testosterone, I mean, you could kind of see that maybe it's related to the less testosterone, but on the other hand, it could be that they are reacting to testosterone in different ways, because you know what testosterone does is it says strive for status. And if your peer group thinks the status is that you act more like a girl, then testosterone is going to push these young men to act more like girls, you know, because testosterone doesn't care about anything but the status. That's what it wants. And so it depends on your peer group. And so, yeah, I think we're going through a transformation, and I'd be real curious to hear why the testosterone levels are going down. And you're blessed to have a lot of it, Ken. That's a good thing. So thank you for the question, boss. Hope that helped a little bit.
Well, I'll also give a shameless plug for Tom. Not for Tom, but for Ken Jovet. He wrote the book Society Kills Men, and I consider it a inspiration for my book series, him and Warren Farrell's books together. And it's like I see myself standing on giants, and he's definitely a giant's shoulder who I'm standing on to get my book out there. So just I do recommend the book Society Kills Men.
Yes.
So good. Feel free to ask questions, get an opportunity with Tom, and he is a very approachable man. He's a big, cuddly teddy bear.
Indeed, he is. You know, one of the things that I noticed when I watched that our interview was that I kind of said, yeah, let's talk about the why later. First, let's talk about the what, but I never talked about the what. I didn't say anything about the what, which is so critical. I mean, we talked about the action-oriented stuff, but the action is broken down into 3 different parts. You know, at least that's what I saw when I was working with these men. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And over again, I'd see the same thing from men, but the action, which men used a lot, was broken down into 3 parts: creative action, practical action, or thinking action. And I've noticed that men would fall into one of those 3 categories and use that as a primary. So you think of Eric Clapton as being a good example of the creative category, where Clapton, after his son died of a tragic accident falling out of a damn skyscraper, what a terrible thing to happen. but he went into this, he called it a waking nightmare for Clapton's this grief. And what Clapton did was he went to himself, solitude, and he started playing guitar. And as he played over the months, 3 songs came to him. And those 3 songs were his creative response to this powerful nightmare he was going through that helped him to basically tell that story of what had happened to him. So that's the creative side. And if you want to know, the Tears in Heaven is the one that everybody knows about. That's really about Will I See Him Again. My Father's Eyes was the second song that he wrote during that time. And that's a song that he wrote to his son saying, thank you for giving me a chance to see my father's eyes through your eyes. Because Clapton had never seen his father before. It's a powerful song. But the third song is really about his grief, and it's called The Circus Left Town. And wow, Clapton had taken his son to the circus the night before the son died. And the song is about saying to his son, that one time to the circus is going to last you the lifetime. Oh man, it's potent. You can't read that or listen to that song without just whoosh, the tears coming through. It's just a powerful, powerful song. But can you see how Clapton used his creativity to tell that story about his son? It's beautiful, beautiful. Did he go into a therapy group? Probably not. Maybe he did, I don't know. But what he did do was he used his strength of music and told his story through that. Jordan, I think we talked a little bit about Jordan in the interview, and Jordan used the practical side. A lot of times men will use their work. They'll dedicate their work. They will use work as a means to tell the story of what happened to them. They'll tell the story about the grief. And Jordan used baseball, where he switched from basketball to baseball. And he, of course, people freaked out. What is he doing? And he was doing it for his father. He was doing it because his father always wanted him to play baseball. So Jordan stopped his career in basketball, which was a storied career, in order to play baseball in honor of his dad. So he was telling that story through his action of moving into baseball. And the thinking area is the hardest really to describe and talk about, because it's the most difficult. It's the most different from grief, because men will use their philosophy. And some women will use their philosophy or their way of thinking in order to tell the story of what's happening with them. Another way to look at that is the grief books. People who are grieving will have this large pile of books about grief, and they're reading these books. What's happening is they're reading the books, they're reading the story about somebody else, but that story is resonating their own story. And it's through that action of reading that they're basically processing their own story. Anyway, enough about that stuff. Is there another question? Or I'll just keep going on and on.
A couple of questions coming in.
What do we got?
We'll start with Jonathan Lawless, greeting from the Philippines. To what extent do you think modern society has normalized women weaponizing their emotions against men to get what they want?
Yeah, really. Isn't that the truth? Hey, Jonathan, good to hear from you. And yeah, man, we have made women crazy. We've literally made women crazy by telling them that, they're not accountable, that we never hold them accountable. And we tell them that they're perfect as they are, and that they can't do anything wrong. And then we've told them that they actually have been cheated out of a good existence. And it's the men who did the cheating. What a crazy, crazy culmination of ideas to put together. And then you take this young woman and you put her in a relationship with a man. What's going to happen? Duh. What's going to happen is there's going to be chaos. You can't go into a relationship with someone who is thinking you're the bad guy, you're the oppressor. That completely throws things off. Relationships need to start where people feel a certain groundedness and feel as though they have a certain equality between them. But they've literally programmed women now to think there's no such thing as that, because they need to get more, because these men have had so much in the past. So yeah, Jonathan, man, I'm with you. We have literally created a monster here, and it's very difficult to find women out there who are able to really have a relationship that seems even slightly equal. Gracious goodness.
So we got, well, I'm actually going to read a comment from Dan Sullivan into the chat. And he says that feminism tries to turn men into inferior women and women into inferior men. But I would add a caveat to that, as we discussed with the not beta blockers, the hormone blockers and plastics. I mean, our society knows this is happening. We've had studies say it, and yet I'm guilty. I'm still drinking out of a plastic bottle because this is just the default. And that's what's reducing men into inferior women. Feminism is just a tool of society.
Oh boy, everything's fueled by gynocentrism. But yeah, don't heat that bottle up. They say that if the plastic bottle is heated up, then you drink it. You can literally taste it. I've tasted it before. A bottle has been in the sun. You take a drink and you go, what is that? That's the endocrine disruptors. You're swallowing them. Ooh, down goes testosterone.
Okay,
yeah.
so
sprinting is a good way to increase your testosterone, guys. Sprint more.
Sprint more, do exercise. I'm going to be doing some yoga in the next year, but not your fancy pampy yoga. I'm going to be doing DDPY from Diamond Dallas Page. He incorporates like physical activity with yoga, and I find very positive results from it. So not that I'm being paid to promote this.
No, I remember
exercise.
There's this group I used to go to sometimes called the 3HO people downtown DC. They'd have exercises you do as you're doing the breath of fire. And if anybody knows, breath of fire is like this. You do that for 2 minutes as you're exercising and see what happens. Then they'd give you 2 minutes to just be quiet and meditate. Then you do it again. By the time you walk out of there, it's like, so yeah, pairing exercise and meditation and yoga is good stuff, man. Good stuff.
And apparently ginseng is great for male energy, but get the roots, not the extract. But we'll move on to our next question by Sean G. Is your mission to assert a right of men to feel? What about the right for men not to feel? I'm thinking that in some cases, men are told to open up about our feelings when there's no real positive intention.
Yeah, my mission is not to assert that men have a right to feel. My mission is to let people know that men are already doing what's right for them. In therapy, over and over again, the same thing happens. Guys would come in, and after a while, I'd point things out and they'd say, holy shit, I'm already doing this work. So my assumption has been that men are already doing it right. Men are good, and men do this correctly, but people don't see it. People use the female template and they put that on top of men and they try and say that, oh, well, men should be like women. No. We need to use different classes to see that men have a very different way of doing things. And, we need to allow men, some men feel less than others. The fascinating research, some, what do you call it? The meta-analysis where they tried to look at, do men and women experience emotions in the same way? And they came up with a 0. They couldn't figure out that men and women had different ways of experiencing emotion, but they did come up with one little piece, which was plugged at the very end of the article. You read the whole thing to get to it, but it was fascinating. What it said was, women experience emotions as an experience. Men experience emotions as a clue for what to do next. That always stuck with me, because women are wondering, why isn't he experiencing emotion as an experience, as something that happens to you? No, he's thinking of it as a marker. Oh, this means I need to do X, Y, Z. It's a very different way of looking at things. And that was a meta-analysis that came up with that conclusion. I thought it was fascinating. So yeah, man, let men be who they are. If men don't want to feel, let them not feel. Love them for who they are.
All right, so we got a question from Carl Palmer. Hello again, hey, Tom. Thanks for your presentation. As you know, you and I have come to many of the same conclusions through our counseling work. Would
Yes,
you
yes.
agree that acknowledging men are different from women can be captured in the concept and practice of respect?
Hmm, that's interesting. For those of you who don't know Carl's a therapist in New Zealand and a good man indeed. Um, I think that respect is certainly a way to capture men. Men thrive on two things: admiration and respect. And if you can respect men and you can admire them, they'll love you. You know, well, I teach women this all the time, in therapy. What can I do to get closer to my husband? Admire him and respect him. And I just say, think back to when you were first dating. Did you admire him then? Oh, yes, he did X, Y, and Z. He was this, that, and the other. And did you respect him? Oh, yes. I wouldn't think of, well, think about that for a while. Try some of that and see if it doesn't work. Because it does. It really does. Men, if you can respect them and admire them, they'll do anything for you. Men will go out of their way to help you out if you can do those things for them. I mean, it's amazing. Whereas women, I think women do like to be respected and they like to be admired, but I don't think it has the same kind of thing with them. I think that, if you look at the old stories, what's the name of that? The King Arthur tales, what they came up with, what do women really want? And there's this old King Arthur tale. I should do a video on this. It's a great old story because what they came up with is women want to be cherished and they want to know they have dominion over their own lives. If you can help a woman with those two things, she'll probably feel much like the man feels when he's respected and admired. So I think we have different ways of being juiced, but men's ways are admiration and respect. I think that's pretty safe. But thank you, Carl. It's good to hear from you, buddy. See you on Sunday. Carl's in our groups, the Patreon groups that we meet every Sunday, and we have a good time.
Oh, I didn't know you were still doing some groups. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, I've been doing this long before regarding men.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a good time, and it's a good group of men.
Well, definitely have to mention that at the end because, all these groups out there, we should be attending them because men do better when we talk to men.
Oh man, it's nothing like it. And men respect others in those groups and they admire others in those groups. And that's the fuel. That's the fuel. It's what helps keep things going. And you get connected to these guys. You get connected. It's great stuff. And it's basically a check-in group where you just check in and say, this week sucked. This week, this happened, that happened. And I'm thinking about doing this. But Bitcoin went up. I mean, who knows? It's like you just tell your story. And you get to know the story of all the other men in the group and you get connected, man. It's great. Because one of the problems with the red pill is it pushes you away from people. But no longer does your family think you're sane. No longer do your workplace think you're sane. So you have been pushed away from people who love and admire you and respect you. These groups are the what's the word for it? The cure for that,
And I will honestly say that what led me to being a host for ICMI was regarding men, the work that
Yes,
Paul and
yes.
Tom did. I got to meet Mike Buchanan, and while I had done the work all these years to get me to that point, just meeting Mike and him getting to know me, he thought I was the perfect person to do this, and I have proved him right so many times this past year.
Jolly good.
So,
Jolly good. Yeah, Chris, you're doing a great job, man.
Well, thank you.
Doing a great job. Patreon.com, men are good. Come see me there.
Although I don't know if we can do the men are good at the end since there's only two of us.
We'll practice.
All right. So we got another question from Ken Jovet. I'm curious about your precarious manhood. Men have to earn manhood and it can be taken away, no doubt. If a man were to emote too much, cry too much, and appear dependent too often, do you think that this man could turn it around in his same community and earn his manhood back when he decides to grow up, change?
That's what they have to do. But the important thing there is that men are precariously placed so that at any time they can fall off that ledge. If you cry too much, if you are too dependent, because that's the key right there is, men need to look independent. And when you realize that, you understand a lot of stuff about why men do the things they do. Men need to look independent. And if you look independent, your manhood is safe. If you look less than independent, if you look dependent, you're in precarious states. You may be just pushed off the ledge. So yeah, it's and then if you're pushed off the ledge, you have to get it back. And a lot of times it's very difficult to get it back. I mean, once someone is seen as, quote, not a man anymore, it's really hard for him to regain that status. That's why men are real careful in not appearing to be in a place where they could be dependent. That's why we don't ask for directions. Someone who asks for directions has to admit they don't know where they're going. They don't know how to get there. And so men will, God, I remember the story in what's her name's book. She was talking about this guy on his first flight. He was in a Cessna. He was flying. He didn't know how to get back to the airport. So he landed in a cornfield, made a phone call, found out where he was, and then got back again. So it's like, men will do what they need to do to appear independent. And there's understandable reasons for that. A lot of understandable reasons.
Well, and this just happened to me yesterday. I was shopping to get prime rib because in my family we eat prime rib for Christmas dinner.
You bet.
And I was in a store and I couldn't find it anywhere. And there was a guy standing there, the butcher. And there was a hesitation from me to ask him where to find something, that if it was there.
Right.
I still did it because, being a man, sometimes we do have to ask for help. There's no shame in that whatsoever, despite what society says. And he was able to point me out to where it was, but it's like, I still feel that hesitation of, am I still a man if I ask this person for help? And the answer is yes. But society has conditioned me to believe that I'm somehow less if I ask for help.
Exactly. And precarious manhood is one of the reasons that men will avoid that, asking for help. And the present day psychological community is shaming men for not asking for help. What's wrong with men? They can't seek help. Well, there's good reasons for it, And of course, one of the other reasons is that man's pain is taboo. Nobody wants to hear their pain, so men don't talk about it. They don't put it out in public. Duh.
And once again, the power of now XY Crew and your Patreon group. I mean, this is an opportunity for men to talk about their pains and not be judged because it's with other men who understand what it's like to go through this. Exactly. And it's a very powerful thing.
It really is. It's great, man. It's just fantastic for people, for men. Just fantastic.
And later today, we're going to have an hour dedicated to those who've been a part of XY Crew and regarding men to talk about the importance that these sort of things are.
Cool.
Because I want more and more men to seek out groups, whether it's with Tom, whether it's with Paul, it doesn't matter. Just as long as you're in that kind of environment, because it does wonders for you.
It really does, man. It's nothing like it.
So we got another question from Sean G. I certainly undergo the freezing phenomenon you refer to in the video. When I really should get crazy, I stiffen and mute myself. I'm boiling inside, but I can't say a word. Can you tell us more about how testosterone functions to freeze men out of the emotional displays?
Boy, I wish I knew, but it's so true. When you are just stressed out, the emotions, you got them, something's bubbling, but you can't articulate it. You can't say anything about it. And this is so critical for guys to know about. Now, the thing is, there's no research on this. There's no research out there that talks about this, because the researchers have been focused on testosterone and violence, testosterone and aggression, blah, 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 blah. And they haven't really gotten to the point where they're looking at testosterone and emotions. The only reason we know this is because of the trans men. And I did 2 interviews with Max Valerio. And man, those are fascinating interviews. Max is an old-time trans man. He did the transition years ago. And Max is just a very solid fellow who speaks a very important story. But the trans men help us understand this whole thing about that men cannot articulate as when they're in the midst of feeling it if they're stressed, you know? So that's the only way we know that is through observation of trans people. Anyway.
I can partially answer this question.
Oh, good.
You're right. A lot of research has not been done. Next to no research has been done into this. But during my own research, I love studying how the brain works, especially because of my brain injury that caused my disability. I just try to learn everything I can, but I also love psychology. Being a writer, I like to write really fascinating characters. And what I've learned in this process about the fight, flight, or freeze
Right.
that happens to us is anytime we receive any sort of stimulation whatsoever, right before it really hits our brain on how to handle it, it passes through what's called the amygdala. Amygdala is often regarded as the emotional regulation of the brain, but it's actually tied to the hippocampus, which is primarily memory. And so for a fraction of a second, it passes through this and it says, is there an emotional connection to this? And if there is, it will hijack your entire brain and that emotion will go off. Like, have you ever heard a joke that was so funny, you just started laughing hysterically? Then you had to step back and why was that funny? That's what's happening right there. It's called the amygdala hijack. Now, what I believe is happening in men is it's looking at the memory and it's like, okay, this falls into the category of crisis that needs to be dealt with, and then passes it on to the rest of the brain on how to handle. Whereas in women, this is crisis, so have a crisis-related emotion. So it hijacks women to do that. Now, of course, not all men, not all women, but for the most part, the male brain is more geared towards crisis. So when it faces crisis, it says, okay, pass this along so the brain can figure out what to do.
All kinds of ideas out there. Anyone interested in this kind of thing, I would suggest you read Jaak Panksepp. Jaak died a while back. It was a sad tale, but he's an older guy, but beautiful research. He wrote some books on the brain and emotions. Jaak literally mapped out the emotional parts of the brain. He came up with 7 different systems, I think he called them, in the brain for emotions. And Jaak tells us that 6 out of the 7 men and women are different. So think about that. I mean, we're very different. We've heard that crap for decades now, that everything is due to socialization. That is bullshit. You know, it's terrible, terrible bullshit. We're very different. We're very different. Just read Jaak. Fascinating stuff. Yeah.
We'll probably email you later getting that information because I'm going to forget. So
I can email you that.
Sounds fascinating. I'd like to read all about
man.
that.
Oh yeah, Jaak is just incredible stuff. He and I corresponded a little bit before he died, and I just was blessed to be able to speak with the guy. It's just fascinating man.
So we've got another question from Carl Palmer. Tom, you have spoken about the balance between dependence and independence. Do you think that there is a place for men to be interdependent?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's what partnership is all about, you know, is being able to be interdependent. And that it's hard to do these days, you know, because of the way that we've brought people up with boys being shamed and boys being villainized and girls being told that, they deserve more. I mean, it's hard to have that interdependence because you've got to have both sides respecting each other, both sides cherishing each other. In a relationship, when both sides can respect and cherish each other, what happens? You have what's called a positive spiral. The relationship spirals up because one person does something for the other person. The other person goes, oh, how sweet. And the other person says, okay, I'm going to do this for them. And it just keeps going up and up and up. So you want to try and get into those positive spirals in an interdependent relationship. That's what it's all about. In a relationship that fails, what happens? You get into a downward spiral. Someone says you're an asshole. Then someone else says, no, I'm not, you are. And it just goes down, down, down the toilet, So yeah, and the interdependence is very different from dependence, and I think that, men are shamed if they are seen as dependent, but men, I think, are admired if they can be interdependent in a true relationship. That's my guess anyway. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I'll be fair. This is the first time I've ever heard the term interdependence, but I can kind of take a guess on what it means. But you're saying that it's different than dependence, and I was thinking it's also on the same wavelength, but still very different than codependence.
Oh,
and
no,
that's the kicker right there.
Completely different. No, my wife and I have an interdependent relationship. She does some stuff really well. I do some stuff really well, and we share those back and forth. I mean, that's interdependence. You both do things for the other in a positive, healthy sort of way, not codependent.
And this is why sports is so important, in my opinion. I know that we've had like Warren Farrell talk about like the dangers of sports, and I agree with him about that. Like in the case of football, of sacrificing yourself just to get a goal so you'll be praised, that's a bad aspect of sports. But one of the best things is about working in a team, and that's where men really thrive. Like when it comes time for a crisis, there was this survival type show. It was a Dutch version, and they had a men's island and a women's island. And in the men's island, there really were no leaders. It's just, hey, something needs to be done. Okay, you go do that. I go do this. Everyone was working. And they created themselves a very good place to live, place to sleep, hunt, eat, whatever they need. The women's island, they really didn't do anything at all. Now, I've seen Naked and Afraid, and I know there are some impressive women out there, but I don't think these were these kind of women. I think they just picked up a group of women, put them on an island and say, okay, do whatever. And they basically did nothing. They just sort of sat there and complained and sunbathed. So what they did is they took two women. Well, actually, they took one woman and one man and swapped them. And then all the men wanted to do everything they can for that woman. That woman really elevated herself because all these men just wanted to do what they could for her. But on the other island, the women enslaved this man to say, hey, we need this done. We need this done. Right? And now he's doing all of this work, even though they don't want to do it.
Oh, God, you got to put a link to that.
I would say that when we all men were together, that was interdependence. That was, hey, something needs to be done. We just need to go and do it. But when it was the swapping, it was codependence. We need something done, so we require you to go and do it while we do next to nothing.
Yes, that's a fascinating story. I hope you link that story below because that's fascinating. But I would have one thing to say about it, and that is the men got things done because they had a hierarchy. They knew who was in charge. Men do this automatically. We move into a hierarchical situation automatically, even without thinking. One of the theorists is saying that men can tell where they are in a hierarchy by the voice, by the man's voice. So it happens automatically. It happens like that. And once you get a hierarchy set, then you know what to do. It's like the old military. The number of stripes on your sleeve tells you where you are in that hierarchy. And someone tells someone, you do this now, right? Well, the thing happens automatically when men naturally work out a hierarchy, and things get done then. Things get done, So hierarchy is a good thing, man. It's not such a bad thing. Neither's patriarchy.
What you learn on a sports team. There's a
Oh
hierarchy.
yeah, yeah. And, boys think about precarious manhood in sports. I mean, boys are proving that they are worthy. Boys are proving that they're quote men, by being there. And yes, there's an element of that that's probably not healthy, but there's a lot of elements that are healthy. He is pushing his own worth. He's saying, "Here I am. Here's what I can do." And a lot of times that's shamed by the culture. Oh, men are good.
And yeah, boys learning how to play in a sports team is going to prepare them for adult life when it comes time to get something done. He
Yes.
knows where he exists in the hierarchy. He knows what he needs to do. He's going to go and get it done. And if he
One of
wants
the
to be elevated in the hierarchy, he knows that it's his works that are going to get him there.
yeah, one of the
Or at
fascinating
least that's
things
the way it
about
should be.
boys and teams is one of the things boys learn is they learn how to tolerate someone they don't like being on their team if that person is talented. They learn how to tolerate someone they don't like. Think about it. Think about how that plays out at work. If someone in your workplace is really good at what they do, but you think they're an ass, you tolerate them. At least the men are able to do that. I won't say anything about the women, but yeah, that's what boys learn on teams. Yeah, he sucks, but God, he can really play. He can help us win. The thing is about let's win. Let's compete. Yeah.
So we got another question from Carl Palmer. He says, Chris,
Carl.
asking for help in situations where he was safe doing so is a demonstration of wisdom. Where are places for men to teach each other and encourage each to exercise wisdom?
Well,
I'll
he was
also
addressing you, right? Yeah.
Well, he addressed me, so yeah, I'm
Yes,
not
you
used
go right
to
ahead.
asking me questions. Um, at the end, there will be a time to ask me a lot of questions. So I hope all of you do. Um, well, it's like we're saying, like, Tom's Patreon group, Men Are Good. And that is a great place where we can really teach. But, one thing that I've been seeing a lot lately is fathers groups going and meeting with children. There was this one fathers group, I forget where it was, but it's just like you get all the local fathers together and some men um, who want to volunteer and go and teach kids like how to tie a tie, how to shave, how to do all of these things, because a lot of these boys don't have a father in their lives. And these are important skills that are being missed out on. But what the children may not be aware of is that part of what they're going to learn is the wisdom of how to be a man. I saw another thing very recently out of school. All of these fathers are coming into the hallways of the school to try to keep order. And since they've been there, I mean, yeah, I don't want to have my father in the hallway of my school when I was growing up. But in all honesty, there's less fights. More people are just going to class. They're not did a lot around, you know. And it's like a man comes up to you and it's like, hey, you need to break this up and get to class. They do it. And, it might seem like, oh, well, they're just being dictators and all of that. It's like, no, they're teaching wisdom. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to learn wisdom. But the problem is, as Tom is stating quite often, is that we're criticized anytime we show any level of wisdom. And what we got to do is to say, you know what, fuck you, I'm going to learn. Tom?
Yeah, what was the original question? My poor brain missed it.
The original question was, where are places for men to teach each other and encourage each other to exercise wisdom?
I think any place, any place. And men are teaching wisdom by being themselves, by telling their truth, speaking their truth, being themselves, standing up and being who they are. I mean, that's really sharing the wisdom, so you can do that anytime. any place, and we need more men to stand up and tell their truth these days, because we're in a mess. We're in a real mess as far as our political stuff goes. And we need strong men to stand up and tell their truth without reservation. Just speak their truth about what's going on, because that helps. It really does help.
So we got another question from Ken Gilvette. I notice women in general think egocentrically, as if everything is processed from a female brain. They expect us to act, think, and speak like a woman. It's very frustrating. How do you handle this in your everyday life, Tom? In your marriage, at dinner parties, in public, etc.?
Boy, what a great question. And the answer to that is I teach. I literally teach. It took me years and years to teach my wife that we're different, and she was receptive when I was able to teach in a civil sort of way. Instead of blow up and get upset about something, I'd say, no, here's the way I do it. This is not the way you do it, or this is what I need from you. Here's what I need from you. And you teach over and over and over again, and people get it. People get it. The workshops I give for women, they really want to know about how men are different. They've never been taught. Think about the testosterone research. I mean, we heard for years from the media about testosterone and aggression, testosterone and violence, your testosterone poisoned, right? But we don't hear anything of the last 5 to 10 years of research where testosterone is about status. Media has just gone completely silent and quiet. Yeah, oh well. What can you say?
So we got a question from Gender Parity UK. Hey Tom, have you read Jack Donovan's excellent new book, Fire in the Dark, which focuses on the representation of different male archetypes in religion and how men created society order out of chaos? It is a wonderful book. Do you agree that men masculinity needs holy representation again?
Oh boy, yeah, I certainly do believe that. It reminds me of Robert Moore's books, the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover books, where he talked about the masculine archetypes. I was not familiar with this fellow's book, and I'll certainly have a look at it, because that's so critical. And the whole thing, if you look at the spiritual leaders over the years, what is the ratio of men to women? About 100 to 1, maybe something like that. Why? Why is that? I think that men are geared towards being connected to the spiritual. And as we are able to be ourselves, as we are able to maintain a certain calmness about ourselves, we move closer and closer to that kind of realm. So yeah, I think there's a connection with spirituality in men. I think men are on a path. Men are on a path whether they know it or not.
Sean G asks, what is positive male role model? I've heard there are not enough of these.
Well, what is positive male role model? I think that's, in some ways, it's kind of a feminist dream, Oh, we need positive male role models. It's like, and of course, they're not going to tell you what that looks like. They're not going to say, oh, that's so-and-so is a positive male role model. But I don't know. See, I think that when men are themselves, when men, go to the playground, look at men with their kids. These are positive male role models. Go any place and look at what men are doing. They're positive male role models. I think men are not really appreciated for the kind of work they're doing in the here and now. Men are modeling all the time. But let the feminists say, oh, there's no positive male role models. Oh, that's their fantasy. That's their fantasy. Men are good. Men are doing good things. Someone said to me the other day, you can't say men are good. That's a terrible thing to say. I said, well, you know what? Maybe 1% of the time I'm wrong. But in 99% of the time, I'm right. I'll take 99% any time. Oh, God. So, yeah, I think if you look at men, look at Chris. Look at what he's doing. What's he doing? He's out there stewarding the space for people. This is a positive male role model. Look at all these speakers. Look at all the people who are asking questions. Positive male role models over and over again. Wake up and know that men are actually doing a good job. The vast majority of men are good people, loving people. Don't take the toxic masculinity pill. Don't believe that bullshit. You know, it's silly. It's silly and it's hateful. We're encouraging hate from our psychological professionals, from feminists. Oh, and they said, the Washington Post had this article, why can't we hate men? Oh, they say it out loud. They bloody say it out loud.
Well, Time Magazine said, hey, kill all men hashtag. It's just a joke. But kill all women, that's serious. Don't ever
That's
do
right.
that.
That's misogyny.
Okay to kill all men.
Misogyny. Moxon would tear that up. So, by the way, Mr. Moxon, I really appreciated your video. It's good stuff. I hope I can get in contact with you. Yeah.
Well, he's not here, so we can't kiss up to Steve.
Maybe someday. Maybe someday.
I talked to him a few times. I actually interviewed him once or twice. So yeah. He's got some good things to say.
Fascinating. His book, The Women Racket, really turned my head when I was looking at things. I guess it was 2008 or so. It's good stuff.
Well, the book of his that I read was Sex Differences Explained, and he really goes almost to a genetic level to really explain the differences between men and women, but society since the beginning. So it's a very fascinating book.
Yeah, he's a good one.
Okay, so that's going to about do it for us today. I thank all of the attendees and the wonderful questions you asked. That really makes these possible. Like if we didn't have any questions, we'd be like, I don't know what to say. So we really thank the attendees for participating. And I thank you, Tom, for coming out today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. What are some ways that people find your stuff?
Menaregood.com is one way, and Men Are Good on YouTube, and patreon.com, Men Are Good. Yeah, kind of a theme there, eh?
Yeah, seems like it, but you know.
And I'm on Twitter, and actually less on Twitter, but on Getter and Gab at TR Golden. So if anybody wants to find me there, that's where I is.
And if there's one thing that we can take away from this entire talk today, it would be that men
are
good. There you go. That's what I was waiting for. Everyone in the chat saying good. So.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Thank you, Dean, Sean, and Carl.
Yep. Completed the experience. All right, everyone, have a good day. We've got Blair Daly coming up, man from out of Seattle. Very good stuff there.
Good stuff.
I will be back on later today with XY Crew. And everyone who's a part of that, please come out for that so we can say how great it is when men get together to talk.
Yes. Good deal.
Check out Tom Golden's Men Are Good Patreon so you can get the same experience there as well. All right, take care.
We'll see you.